The knock came sharp and deliberate, 3 hard raps against the front door that carried more arrogance than politeness. Danielle Price looked up from the papers spread across her dining table. Contracts, case notes, and a cooling cup of coffee sat in front of her. She wasn't expecting company, and that knock didn't sound like a friendly neighbor dropping by. She set her pen down, stood, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, she saw him. A man in his late 40s, average build, shirt tucked in too tightly over his stomach, a clipboard clutched in one hand like a weapon. His face wore the smug confidence of someone who believed the world owed him attention. Danielle unlocked the deadbolt and cracked the door. "Can I help you?" The man's grin was immediate, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Afternoon, ma'am." "Frank Miller, HOA inspector for this neighborhood. I'm here about some violations on your property." He lifted the clipboard slightly, as though it were a badge of honor. Danielle blinked once, then opened the door a little wider. "Violations?" "That's right," Frank said, his tone casual but laced with superiority. "Couple of issues need to be addressed. Your mailbox is outdated, doesn't meet code. Your shutters? Wrong color. And the grass—" He pointed with his pen at her yard, which was trimmed neatly and greener than most on the block. "Not up to standard." Her brows lifted. "Really?" "Really," he said firmly, jotting something onto the clipboard. "Now, normally these fines add up quick. But lucky for you, I'm here today. We can handle this directly. Save you the headache of going through the board." Danielle studied him carefully. His shirt collar was frayed. The official laminate badge clipped to his pocket looked like it had been printed on a home computer, and his eyes kept darting to the street like he wanted an audience. Behind him, a car rolled by slowly. A neighbor across the street, Lisa Carter, stepped out onto her porch, watering can in hand. She paused mid-step, eyes narrowing as she glanced toward Danielle's driveway. Frank noticed her too, but he turned back quickly, raising his voice just slightly. "You see, the HOA takes pride in this community," he continued. "We can't have homeowners lowering the value of property around here. Families move in expecting a certain standard." He looked her up and down with a smirk that made the meaning clear. "And families like yours need to play by the rules." Danielle felt the words hit, heavy and pointed, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she folded her arms, her tone even. "So you're saying my mailbox, my shutters, and my lawn are violations?" "Exactly," Frank said, tapping his pen against the clipboard with each word. "Serious ones, too. But like I said, I'm willing to work with you. If you can make a payment today, say $500, we can make this all go away before it gets messy." Danielle let a pause stretch, her silence deliberate. She watched him, watched the sweat bead faintly on his temple, though the afternoon breeze was cool. She didn't respond right away, and the quiet made him shift his weight from one foot to the other. Finally she spoke, her voice calm. "Do you have documentation of these so-called violations?" Frank waved the clipboard. "Right here." She leaned slightly to glance at it, but the papers were blank, save for a few scribbles. No official letterhead, no HOA seal, not even her name. Her lips twitched into the faintest smile. "Interesting." Frank mistook it for hesitation. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice to something meant to sound threatening. "Look, lady, you don't want trouble. I've seen families like yours make things harder than they need to be, and trust me, you won't win against the board." Across the street, Lisa Carter had set down her watering can. She was watching openly now, her expression wary. Another neighbor walking his dog slowed his pace, glancing toward the exchange. Frank noticed and puffed his chest, emboldened by the attention. This is your only chance to settle quietly. Otherwise, these fines double, and we'll be forced to escalate. Nobody wants that." Danielle's eyes sharpened, but her tone stayed calm, measured. "Is that so?" "That's so," he said, planting his free hand on his hip. "500 today, cash. I'll make sure the paperwork disappears." The arrogance rolled off him like heat from asphalt. He believed he had her cornered, believed the sight of a clipboard, a fake badge, and a loud enough voice would be enough to intimidate her. But Danielle Price wasn't built for intimidation. She stepped fully into the doorway, her shoulders squared, her voice steady. "You've made yourself very clear, Mr. Miller." Frank smirked. "Good. So we have a deal?" Her answer was cool, deliberate. "Not quite." And for the first time, his confidence faltered. Because Danielle wasn't finished, not even close, her answer was cool, deliberate. "Not quite." And for the first time, Frank Miller's confidence faltered. His smirk slipped just enough to reveal the cracks underneath. He straightened his clipboard, cleared his throat, and forced the grin back onto his face. "What's the holdup then?" he asked, louder this time, projecting his voice for the neighbors who were starting to linger. "You want to make this official?" "Fine. I can write you up right here and now. Doesn't matter to me." Danielle didn't move from her doorway. Her arms crossed, her gaze fixed firmly on him. "Go ahead." Frank blinked. "Excuse me?" "Write it up," she repeated calmly. "If these are real violations, I want to see them." "In writing? With dates, signatures, and the name of the board president who authorized you to collect money on my doorstep." The faint murmur of voices carried across the street. Lisa Carter had moved closer to her porch railing, curiosity etched on her face. The man walking his dog slowed further, now standing at the edge of his lawn with the leash slack in his hand. Frank's jaw clenched. "Lady, don't get smart with me." Danielle tilted her head slightly. Smart or simply asking for proof? The words hit him harder than he expected. Proof. That was the one thing he didn't have. His clipboard was empty, his badge fake, his authority non-existent. But the presence of neighbors gave him no room to retreat. If he backed down too quickly, the performance collapsed. And Frank Miller thrived on performance. So he raised his chin and puffed his chest. "You think you're clever, huh? Well, I'll tell you this. I've seen people fined thousands for less. Families forced to sell their homes because they didn't play by the rules. Don't think you're above that." Danielle's eyes didn't waver. She let the words hang in the air until they curdled. "Are you threatening me?" Frank grinned, but it was strained. "Call it what you want." "I call it reality. You keep pushing, you'll find yourself buried under penalties you can't pay. And trust me." His voice dropped, just low enough to sound like a warning. "Families like yours don't last long in this neighborhood when they make enemies with the HOA." A ripple of discomfort passed through the small crowd now gathering. Lisa exchanged a look with the dog walker, her expression tight. They weren't sure what they were hearing, but they knew it didn't sound right. Danielle uncrossed her arms slowly, her movements calm but deliberate. "So let me understand. You're demanding cash, on the spot, for alleged violations you refuse to document, and if I don't pay, you're threatening retaliation?" Her words carried, crisp and clear, enough that even the teens passing on their bikes slowed, curiosity pulling them toward the sidewalk. Frank shifted his weight, realizing too late that she'd repeated his scheme back to him, stripped of the bluster, laid bare for everyone to hear. His grin faltered, but pride wouldn't let him back down. He snapped the clipboard up, scribbling wildly on the blank page with his pen. There. Written violation. Happy? He shoved it toward her like a weapon. Danielle didn't take it. She glanced down once, then raised her eyes back to his. You spelled my name wrong. That drew a ripple of laughter from somewhere in the crowd. Quick, quiet, but enough to make Frank's ears burn. His voice sharpened. Lady, don't test me. I can make your life miserable. The HOA doesn't care who you are, what job you do, or how long you've lived here. You're just another name on the ledger, and names can be erased. Danielle's calm deepened, her voice lowering but cutting sharper than his. And what ledger would that be, exactly? The question hung heavy. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Lisa Carter stepped closer to the edge of her driveway, arms folded, watching openly now. The dog walker shook his head and muttered something under his breath. Another neighbor stepped out onto her porch, curiosity pulling her into the scene. The crowd was growing. Frank realized it too late. The intimidation wasn't working. The harder he pushed, the calmer Danielle became, and the calmer she became, the weaker he looked. Still, he wasn't ready to quit. He jabbed a finger toward her shutters. You think I don't see that? Wrong color. Not approved. That's a violation if I've ever seen one. 500 today, or it goes on the record. Danielle finally smiled, faint but unmistakable. Funny, because I'm the one who filed the paperwork for those shutters, and I made sure they were approved. Frank's pen slipped in his hand. His grin vanished completely. The clipboard wavered. Danielle stepped forward, just enough that the distance between them shrank to inches. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, but it carried with the weight of certainty. Keep talking, Mr. Miller. Dig the hole deeper, because the more you say, the harder it's going to be when the truth comes out. Frank's face flushed red, his jaw tightening. He leaned closer, lowering his voice in a final attempt at control. Lady, you don't know who you're messing with. Danielle's reply was immediate. Neither do you. The air shifted. For the first time, it wasn't Frank controlling the stage. It was Danielle. Calm, patient, letting him bury himself one word at a time. And the neighbors knew it too. The quiet murmur spread, whispers rolling across the small crowd that had begun to form along the street. A delivery truck slowed as it passed, the driver leaning out his window for a second look before rolling on. What started as Lisa Carter watering her flowers and one man walking his dog was turning into a ring of eyes, all fixed on Danielle's front porch. Frank Miller felt the shift immediately. The confidence he wore like armor started to crack. His posture stiffened, his grin pulled too tight. But his voice got louder. He doubled down, as men like him often did when the ground beneath them turned soft. You all hear that? He barked, gesturing to Danielle as though he were the ringmaster of a circus. Violations. Clear as day. Mailbox, shutters, lawn. It's all right here. He shook the clipboard for emphasis, though the papers flapped in the breeze like empty flags. Danielle didn't move. She stood in her doorway, arms loose at her sides, her expression calm enough to look unshakable. Her silence was sharper than his shouting. Lisa Carter took another step forward, her hands resting on her hips. Strange, she said, her voice steady but carrying across the space. We've lived here for 10 years and I've never once seen an HOA inspector. Not once. A couple of neighbors nodded. Someone muttered, Exactly. Frank spun toward Lisa, forcing a smile that was more snarl than charm. Maybe you just haven't been paying attention, ma'am. I've been through this neighborhood plenty. People like her. He jabbed his pen back toward Danielle. They're the ones always making trouble. The words hung heavy. Too heavy. The crowd murmured again, but this time it wasn't supportive. Lisa folded her arms tighter. The dog walker shook his head. And Danielle? She finally stepped forward, one slow pace out onto her porch. Her voice carried, calm and cutting. You say you're here for the HOA. Then why don't you tell everyone the name of the board president? Frank blinked. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. Danielle's eyes stayed locked on him. Go ahead. Say it loud enough for everyone to hear. The crowd hushed. Even the teens leaning on their bikes leaned in. Frank coughed into his fist. That's not important right now. It's important if you're demanding money, Danielle said evenly. It's important if you're threatening my family. If you're standing here, clipboard in hand, telling everyone I'm in violation, then it should be the easiest question in the world. Lisa's voice rang out. Well? What's the name? More whispers. Someone near the back chuckled bitterly. Frank's ears turned red. He tried to pivot. Look, folks, you don't understand. These rules are complicated. I'm just doing my job. Your job? Danielle cut in, her voice like a blade sliding free of its sheath. Show us your credentials. Show us the HOA identification card that proves you have any authority here. The crowd pressed closer. A mother with her toddler on her hip whispered, Yeah, let's see it. The dog walker chimed in. If you're official, shouldn't you have something more than a clipboard? Frank stammered, tugging at the cheap laminate badge clipped crookedly to his shirt. Right here. Right here. He waved it proudly, but the closer it got, the cheaper it looked. Laminated paper with a blurry logo, the kind you could print at home in 15 minutes. Laughter rippled, soft at first, then louder. The teens on their bikes smirked openly, one whispering, That's fake as hell. Danielle didn't smile. Her voice stayed calm, deliberate. You came to my door demanding $500 in cash. You waved around an empty clipboard. You threatened me in front of witnesses. And now the neighbors are asking for proof. And all you have is that. Frank's voice pitched higher. It's not fake. You don't know what you're talking about. But his tone betrayed him. His words had lost their weight. Lisa Carter shook her head slowly. I think she knows exactly what she's talking about. The murmurs swelled. Frank's eyes darted from face to face, searching for someone to back him up. But all he saw were folded arms and skeptical stares. He turned back to Danielle, lowering his voice in desperation. Look, you don't want to do this. Let's settle it quietly. Just you and me. No need to embarrass yourself in front of the neighborhood. But Danielle didn't budge. Embarrassment isn't mine to carry, Mr. Miller. It's yours. The words cut clean, and the crowd knew it. A couple of neighbors clapped once, sharp and sarcastic. The teens laughed outright. Frank's hand shook as he clutched his clipboard. The performance was slipping. The spotlight he had craved was turning harsh, revealing every flaw in his act. Danielle's calm composure had flipped the script. He wasn't the enforcer anymore. He was the spectacle. And everyone was watching, and everyone was watching. Frank Miller shifted uncomfortably under the weight of so many eyes. What had started as a show of authority was unraveling into humiliation. His face flushed, his voice sharpened, but the neighbors weren't buying the act anymore. Danielle Price, on the other hand, hadn't raised her voice once. She stood steady at the top of her porch steps, shoulders squared, gaze firm. Calm wasn't weakness. Calm was power, and she was about to wield it. Frank waved his clipboard again, desperate to reclaim control. This is official business. These violations are real. If she doesn't pay today, the HOA will take her house. Mark my words, the crowd murmured, some skeptical, others shaking their heads. Lisa Carter spoke up again, her voice clear. Funny, because last I checked, our HOA hasn't even held a meeting in years. Isn't that right? A few neighbors nodded, voices chiming in. Exactly. There's no board right now. I haven't paid dues in forever. Frank froze. His smirk collapsed into something brittle. He tried to laugh it off. Well, that's because the board delegated authority. To me. Danielle took a single step forward, her eyes never leaving his. Then you'll have no problem showing us the delegation letter. The one signed by the president of the HOA, giving you power to issue fines and collect cash on their behalf. His mouth opened, closed. No words. The neighbors chuckled. One muttered, "He's got nothing." Danielle let the laughter settle before she moved. Slowly, deliberately, she bent down, reached into the side table just inside her doorway, and pulled out a slim leather wallet. She flipped it open with practiced ease and held it up for everyone to see. Inside, her state bar card. Clear, official, undeniable. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the air with precision. Frank Miller. My name is Danielle Price. I'm a licensed real estate attorney, and I know exactly what's legal in this neighborhood and what isn't. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The shift was instant. Heads turned, eyes widened. Lisa Carter broke into a grin. The dog walker let out a low whistle. Even the teens leaned forward, whispering, "Oh, he's done." Danielle continued, her tone sharp but controlled. There is no functioning HOA in this community right now, which means there are no fines, no penalties, and certainly no authority for you to be standing on my porch demanding cash. She took another step down, closing the gap until she stood level with him. What you're doing is fraud. What you're doing is intimidation, and you've done it in front of witnesses. Frank's face went pale. His eyes darted wildly to the neighbors, then back to Danielle. I was just trying to scam me, Danielle finished for him, but you picked the wrong door. The neighbors erupted, voices overlapping. Unbelievable. He tried to scam her? Right in broad daylight. Lisa crossed her arms, shaking her head. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Danielle wasn't done. She lifted the clipboard from his trembling hand with ease, flipping through the blank pages for everyone to see. No violations, no signatures, nothing but empty paper. She held it high, letting the crowd murmur louder. This is what he came with. This is his proof. Frank reached for it weakly. Give that back. But Danielle pulled it away, her gaze sharp. You came to my home to bully me. You tried to use fear to line your pockets, and you thought no one would question you. She let the words linger, each one striking like a gavel. But knowledge is protection, and the law doesn't bow to con artists. The applause started small, one or two neighbors clapping, then spread. The teens who had been recording now shouted, "Busted!" The dog walker laughed openly. Lisa Carter smiled wide, her eyes fixed on Frank. The man who had strutted down the street minutes earlier now stood cornered, exposed and humiliated. His clipboard limp at his side, his badge nothing more than a cheap prop. His lies collapsed under the weight of truth. And Danielle? She hadn't even raised her voice. Frank Miller's face was the color of damp paper. His bravado, once puffed up like a balloon, now sagged in tatters. The crowd's eyes pierced him, no longer curious but openly hostile. Whispers had turned to laughter, laughter to jeers. And in the center of it all stood Danielle Price, calm, steady, unshaken. He tried one last time to salvage his dignity. You people don't understand. I was only trying to enforce. Enforce what? Lisa Carter cut him off, her voice slicing through the noise. She stepped forward, arms folded. Fake rules? Fake fines. You don't speak for this neighborhood. You never did. The dog walker raised his voice, too. You came here with nothing but a clipboard and a scam. The teens chimed in, grinning as their phones kept rolling. Yeah, whole neighborhood saw you get shut down. One of them laughed. This is going viral tonight. Frank's jaw clenched. His gaze darted, searching for a sympathetic face, but found none. He looked small now, swallowed by the circle of witnesses. Danielle tilted her head, her voice carrying with the weight of finality. Frank Miller, you've made yourself clear. You preyed on people you thought wouldn't fight back. But this ends today. She held his fake badge high one last time before dropping it into his limp hand. Take your lies and take them off my porch. The words echoed, sharp and undeniable. The neighbors erupted, some clapping, others laughing outright. One shouted, "Don't come back!" Another added, "We don't want your kind here!" Frank stammered, his face tight with rage and shame. For a moment it looked like he might argue, might lash out, but the wall of disapproval around him was too thick. He turned, muttering under his breath, and stormed down the sidewalk. The teens followed him with their cameras, narrating mockingly. There he goes, HOA hero without an HOA. Their laughter trailed behind him until he disappeared around the corner, shoulders hunched, his clipboard clutched like a lifeline. Silence settled for a beat. Then applause broke out again, louder this time, genuine. Danielle exhaled, finally allowing herself a small smile. Lisa Carter stepped onto the porch and squeezed her shoulder. You handled that with more grace than I would have. Danielle's smile widened just slightly. Grace is stronger than anger. And besides, the truth was enough. The dog walker chuckled, adjusting his leash. Truth and a law license, he added with a grin. Laughter rippled through the neighbors. The tension had broken, replaced by warmth. Danielle glanced around at the faces. People she had lived beside for years, some she barely knew. Tonight, though, they all shared something. A moment of clarity, of unity against intimidation. She spoke softly, but her words carried. Scammers like him count on silence. They count on fear, but knowledge protects us, and standing together makes us stronger. The crowd nodded, murmurs of agreement passing from one to another. Lisa Carter added, You just reminded all of us. Dignity isn't something anyone can take. The group lingered a little longer, conversations sparking in clusters, laughter easing the sting of what had almost been. One by one, they drifted back to their homes, their doors closing with a little more assurance, their steps a little lighter. Danielle stayed on the porch for a moment after the street cleared. She looked down at her lawn, her shutters, her mailbox, the so-called violations Frank had used as weapons. She saw them for what they really were, pieces of her home, symbols of her life. Imperfect, perhaps, but hers. She tucked her bar card back into its wallet and slipped it inside. Her fingers lingered on the leather for a moment before she let it go. Behind her, the house was quiet, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt strong, protected. As she closed the door, her final thought echoed the lesson of the night. Respect isn't demanded by threats or scams. Respect is earned by truth. And truth had won. If you love stories like Danielle's, click the subscribe button. There are many more worth telling.